Aye.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a call to order of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee meeting. Today is 1/21/22. The time is now 6:31 p.m. In attendance, we have committee member Erica Castillo, myself, Joseph Scalaway, committee chair, board member Bobby Brown, chair of the board online. Dr. McPherson is present. Ms. Aljo Dixon, and I'm sorry, I don't know the next person's name. Is she presenting?
No.
No, okay, thank you. And a member of the audience. Okay, thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes dated 1/21/22, which I believe I said was the date, which is incorrect. Today is the 30th. Motion to approve the minutes dated 11/21/22. Good.
So moved.
I shall second. Do you see any corrections needing to be made? Any discussion on the minutes?
No.
I second. I see nothing as well. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Next up is goals and objectives for the committee for 2023. Good Lord, I'm still a year behind. And pretty much basically exactly the same as we started last year. The Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion overall objectives are to use data-driven information to apply an equity lens to the entire Bridgeport public school system and to identify any and all policy, procedures, programs, or services that are having a disparate impact on any distinct group of students or staff. The committee shall seek to rectify any issues found through committee discussion, research, and will also make referrals to other committees, create focus groups, and or make referrals to the full board for further action. We will also seek to promote initiatives to promote unity amongst Bridgeport Public Schools' diverse student body, staff, and the greater Bridgeport school community. Do we have anything to add, change, or any suggestions, Ms. Castillo?
No, sounds good. It sounds like a little, like a mission statement. Sounds good to me.
Dr. McPherson, anything you would like to see added or subtracted?
Not at this time, no.
Yeah, I don't see anything. So, okay, so, you know what? I don't have this as an action item. So we can't approve them. But I will read them out at the next board meeting as part of my presentation and state everybody sounded okay with it. So next up on the agenda is discussion of 3-year historic data of certified staff student demographics and the comparison side by side. Who's taking that away? You're gonna take that away? Do we have slides online too?
I don't think so.
And we don't have slides online. You could check your packets, everybody. But there is an update. And
Yeah,
update.
got it. Thank you.
Right. There's an update to one of the set of numbers. Yeah, did you get in the packet?
Speak of the admin. All right. You do the admin.
Are you ready?
Mr. Sakala?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yes, please.
All right, first, we have to apologize. We noticed an error in the data presented in the packets regarding the BCAS, the supervisors or administrators, the breakdown of the percentage and the total head count of our administrators. Unfortunately, we could not upload anything to the system to provide you all with this the different information. But focusing on the breakdown from 2020, the numbers were for those BCAS, which is any educator above a teacher. So this could be the special ed supervisors, dean of students, assistant principals, and certain department directors such as science and performing arts. In 2020, we had a total of 79 supervisors. 1 identified as American Indian, Alaskan Native. 1 identified as Asian. 23 identified as Black or African American. 8 identified as Hispanic or Latino, and 46 identified as Caucasian or white. When you look at the percentage, that means it was 1.27% for American Indian, Alaskan Native, 1.27% for Asian, 29.11% for those identified as Black, African American, 10.13% for those who identified as Hispanic and Latino, and 58.23% for those who identified as white. In 2021, the administrators totaled 87. 1 identified as American Indian, Alaskan Native, that was 1.15%. 1 identified as Asian, again, 1.15%. In 2021, 23 administrators identified as Black African American, which was 26.44%. The Hispanic and Latino was represented by 9 supervisors at 10.34%. And 53 supervisors identified as white, which was 60.92%. In 2022, again, 1 supervisor identified as American Indian, Alaskan Native at 1.03%. I'm sorry, in 2022, we had a total of 97 supervisors. 2 identified as Asian, bringing the percentage to 2.06%. In 2022, 28 supervisors identified as Black or African American, bringing it to 28.87%. 10 identified themselves as Hispanic or Latino, bringing it to 10.31%. And 56 identified as Caucasian or white, totaling 57.73%.
Record reflect Mr. Keisha Casimir is here.
I'll
Okay, so you're gonna do that.
do the teacher first. So a breakdown of teachers, the same 3-year demographic comparison by race. In 2020, we had 3 teachers identify as American Indian, Alaskan Native, which represented 0%. We had no one in 2020 identify as American Indian, Alaskan Native, and white. 2020, we had 41 teachers identify as Asian. That's 3% of the total teaching population. We had no one identify as Asian and white. We had no one identify as Black and white, non-Hispanic. We had 169 identify as Black or African American, which was 11%. We had 179 identify as Hispanic Latino, that is 12%. We had 11 identify as 2 or more races, which is 1%, and 14 unknowns, which is also 1%. We had 1,088 identify as white, which is 72%. In 2020, there was a total of 1,505 teachers. 2021, we had 3 teachers identify as American Indian, Alaskan Native. We had 1 teacher identify as American Indian, Alaskan Native, and white. We had 46 teachers identify as Asian, 3%. We had 1 identify as Asian and white, which was again 0%. We had 4 identify as Black and white, non-Hispanic, 0%. We had 178 identify as Black or African American, that was 12%. We had 195 identify as Hispanic Latino, that is 13%. We had 13 identify as 2 or more races, 1%. We had 15 identify as unknown, 1%. And we had 1,080 identify as white, 70%. In 2021, there was a total of 1,536 teachers. And then in 2022, again, we had 3 identify as American Indian, Alaskan Native, which is 0%. We had 1 identify as American Indian, Alaskan Native, and white, 0%. We had 47 identify as Asian, 3%. We had 2 identify as Asian and white, 0%. We had 8 identify as Black and white or non-Hispanic, 0%. I'm sorry, 1%. We had 188 identify as Black and or African American, 12%. We had 177 identify as Hispanic Latino, 12%. We had 13 identify as 2 or more races, 13, that is 1%. We had 20 identify as unknown, again, that's 1%. And we had 1,061 identify as white, which was 70%. In 2022, there was a total of 1,520 teaching staff.
Okay. Any questions, Ms. Castillo?
No, sir.
Ms. Casimir?
No questions.
Ms. Brown?
No questions at the moment.
Okay, could you, if one of you ladies can go into the packet and go over the student demographics, please. Probably Sam. I sent you an email with 3 pictures on it. It's on the. Come on. Can you get them? You got the.
Yeah, we got the packet.
Yeah, that's just the breakdown, please.
All right, so this is for this
Just for this current year.
for this current school year. Okay, American Indian, we have 103 students. For Asian, we have 377 students. For Black African American, we have 5,540. Hispanic, 11,166 students. Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander, 22 students. 2 or more races, 380 students. And white, 1,687 students. You want the percentages for that?
They're actually highlighted up there. I just
Okay.
sent the picture.
Okay.
And I'm gonna
All right.
go on to Mansfield. Why is all this so important? If we look at our student demographic body for this year, that's Is it possible to make that a little bigger? I can actually. If not, it's okay. I can pull it. Hispanics make up 58% of our student body. And they make up approximately 10.31% of our administrators and 11.64% of our teachers. And the same thing, you look at the African Americans, you see 29% African American for the students, and then you see our teachers are 12.37%. Not as a wide disparity as with the Hispanic teachers to the student ratios, but large disparity nonetheless. And of course, you see the white students at 9%, and 69% of the teachers teaching our students are Caucasian, which is wonderful. We love teachers of all races, colors, and creeds, but we need to do better at recruiting. I know we do best in the state, probably among the best in the states in our recruitment efforts, and it's not easy, but I would like to find ways to improve on our numbers, not improve on the numbers in Stanford, not to rest on our laurels that we're doing better than anybody else. Do better next year than we've done this year. And that's why last year we kind of set a goal on it to try to increase the incoming cohorts diversity by, I can't remember the factor, like a 5 or 10% factor. And let me see, I can't even say if we met that. Did you bring up the next slide, as well? Because it says something when you look at the pie chart side by side, or one that
Side by side.
no, do one after the other, please.
Talking about the administrator.
Yeah, all three. Teachers, hit teachers first, then students, then administrators, and then students. Can you do it that way, please? Now we see the Hispanics in the yellow, African Americans in gray, and white in the blue. Flip to the students. I apologize. I thought we had a slide showing here. Now you can see it's like almost the exact inverse of the numbers between Hispanics students versus Hispanic teachers and Caucasian students and Caucasian teachers. And that says a lot. Can you do the administrators, please?
The administrators is not going to be correct, the pie chart.
Oh, right. Never mind. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out again. Yeah, so what current initiatives do we have to increase our diversity pool in our teachers?
So actually, I met with my diversity, equity, and inclusion team. We're doing a training through CES, but part of it, our homework was we talked about action plans and what we can do. So one of the things we are focusing on, like you had prepared today, is data collection. So in addition to this type of data, we want to know more about tracking applicants, like who is applying, and then what happens during the process of these applicants. If we have 10% of people of color applying, what happens between when they apply to when the job is filled? So we're going to look for data on that. We're also focusing on exit interviews, like getting information as to why people are leaving our district. If you saw, we saw a marked decrease in Hispanic and Latino teachers in 1 year. They dropped a decent amount, I noticed, between 2021 and 2022. So we want to focus on why people are not remaining, and we want to focus on why teachers of color are not remaining in the district. We want to also focus on, one of our biggest resources of our new hires are their student interns, our student teachers. So we want to focus on the demographics of those interns and student teachers. So again, focusing on and working with the local youth schools and universities to obtain their data on what their head count for their students enrolled, students of color, keeping track of how many interns of color or student teachers of color. We also want to pull data from the State Department of Education, see how their data reflects on their diversity in their own employment. We want to focus on diverse student organizations. We also want to reach out to the schools, as we've all realized, and it's been constantly reported, the numbers of students or people enrolling in education programs is decreasing tremendously. And I think we found out this past year, maybe the science students going on to teach science, there might have been a couple in this year's class, whereas in the past there might have been double digits. So we want to track where is the decrease really? Is it overall? Can we see if there's a marked decrease in candidates or people of color going into the teaching profession? So our first thing is to gather as much data as we can, and from there we'll take the data, we'll review it, and we'll focus on creating different strategic plans to address that. One of the things we have done and will continue to do is, and I think someone mentioned this in one of the meetings, focused partnerships. It's nice to have partnerships with every school, but we want to make sure we're having partnerships with the right schools. We want to make sure that we're focusing our time and energy on the schools that can give us what we need. So focusing on schools that have a higher level, a head count of teachers or students of color that are in their program. We are working on attending a lot more job fairs and hosting job fairs. Last year, we saw the return of our in-person job fairs. We've signed on with an online platform to do online job fairs, and we are signing up. We have 4 job fairs coming up in February and March, and I'm sorry, 1 in April, when we're going to look to expand beyond Connecticut. We're looking at job fairs in the Philadelphia area. We're looking at job fairs in the Boston area within reason. Recognizing that some of our local students do go out to these other states for education, and hopefully we could go in and bring them back to Bridgeport. We also want to focus our relationships on the local schools and local universities. Start attending more like informational meetings. Attend freshman orientation. Attend any type of informational meetings they might have geared towards people going into the field of education. If we could get out there and say, hey, as part of your program to become a teacher, you're going to need to do A, B, C, and D. Come to Bridgeport. We will work with you as your intern, your student teaching, and if all goes well, we will hire you. So we want to focus and get them from the beginning and maybe encourage people to go into education by going to freshman orientation. Now, with that, part of my committee we were talking about is being more present in and making us known that we are a very diverse staff. When as you see in a lot of the data, a lot of the administrators, right, we do have a high level of administrators that identify as white. We were talking about how when you go into an interview, and if everyone you see is white and you're someone who's Black and things, how that might feel, how it might impact on you as the person interviewing, you as the person being interviewed. So we want to create something where people can see that we are actually pretty diverse. We have room to grow in our diversity, but we are diverse. So we want to make sure that people can see that we have all different ethnic or racial representation, and we're continuing to grow, and we're continuing to try to expand that. We want to keep reaching out to our local alumni, people who have gone off to school but are now back in Bridgeport. Maybe they have connections or suggestions that we can do. So tapping into that. Also looking at maybe former teachers or administrators who worked in Bridgeport Public Schools, but now work at a higher education level. They might be a good resource to make contact with and get a hold of them and get our foot in the door to make ourselves known and keep on recruiting everyone. Again, one of the things Beswick Channer mentioned, Boston Public Schools has an amazing program that they do. So, one of the things we want to do is look into their program and look at other successful school districts that have been successful at recruiting and increasing staff of color, and not so much copying their tactics or their strategies, but borrowing them and making them unique and most effective and efficient for Bridgeport Public Schools. We talk about hiring. The other key thing is retention. So getting you in the door is one thing, but how am I going to keep you here? We see a high turnover in the younger teachers. So one of the things we were talking about is creating, we kind of call them support groups or things like that. Groups of, I think Beswick mentioned, there's a group of men, Black male teachers or Black male administrators, and they meet once in a while to get together. So by doing that and focusing on support and professional growth, I think will increase our retention, which is another key thing we want to get. Again, hiring you is one thing, but I want to keep you. And then we were talking about also advertisements. Bridgeport Public Schools seems to have people think poorly, or they are quick to conclude or draw assumptions on all of Bridgeport Public Schools. Every district has good students. Every district has bad students. This is not specific to Bridgeport. So we want to make sure that we are out there and we are selling Bridgeport and all the wonderful things we have. Like Bassick is building an airplane. I mean, that thing is going to fly soon. I mean, how amazing is that? So a couple of years ago when I first started, we created a recruitment video, and we had a lot of our veteran staff. We had a lot of diverse members on this video. So we want to update it. We want to create it again, and we want to highlight the wonderful things that Bridgeport Public School has to offer, not only to students in the community, but also to our staff. And, we are focusing on professional growth and things like that, we want you not only to teach our students and the children of Bridgeport, but we want to also teach you. We want to help you grow professionally. So I know I said a lot, so there's a lot, but I mean, these are things that, are all the things that we are trying to do and we're trying to work on. And we're hoping that even if we could increase our percentages by 2-3% for this upcoming school year, we're going to be hitting peak hiring season soon. So, I mean, if we could just increase a few percentage, it's the step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Casimir, any questions?
No, I'm just really impressed by the thorough, report that you just gave about all the different strategies that you're using. Do you need any help implementing some of these things, or what?
I need to win Powerball.
Well, yeah, we all need.
A lot of it does come to financials, and that's where we are impacted the most. Is that we cannot financially compete with the Fairfields, the Norwalks, and their salaries. So I remember talking, and I said one of the things I liked about Bridgeport is that despite being the largest district in the state, we operate on a small district feel. Like I remember, and I tell the story that there was an emergency at a school last year, and on the phone was ranged down from the superintendent, social work, the director of social work, the principal, HR, and so it's no matter what, it's we do come together and we try to sell that to offset what we cannot offer financially. But I think I'm open for ideas. If anyone has any interesting recruiting ideas that we haven't done, I mean, we are definitely open for suggestions. We continuously try to think outside of the box. For example, one of the local businesses was, they were releasing all of their, I think, their accounting and business department. So we thought, well, hey, maybe we could try to reach out to them and see if any of them are science or math bachelors, or they hold a degree, and we'll train them and work with them to get to gain the certifications. So, I mean, other than money, just support and ideas. If you know someone, then let us know. Anyone who can help us, if ideas on where best to advertise or recruit, we're open for it.
Have to go, oh, who was,
Yeah,
is that somebody that we know?
I don't know.
Don't they have to go in the front through security?
Ms. Castillo?
I think Miss Bobby has or Miss Brown has her hand
Her hand
raised.
Right, yeah.
No, I don't have any.
Committees first, though. Okay, Ms. Brown?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I appreciate the thoughts and the work behind doing the research, because one, the research on finding what is the interest for staff members that are, that are different races. I think that is very, very, ethnicities is very important, because last year we were talking about, especially looking at the Hispanic population of students versus teachers, what, and I'm not Hispanic, but I'm also looking at culture. Is teaching like a large part of the culture that those individuals who are Hispanic go into? Is there an interest there? Because I can only speak for being African American. There was a large push, I believe, when I was in college, where a lot of the educators, a lot of African American students begin to push in for the education stance and become teachers. And I truly believe, that the idea of making sure that those that are teaching reflect our students. And that was like a major push just in the Black community alone. So hearing my friends and hearing different individuals saying they're going either into the education field because they missed that individual that looked like them teaching. I didn't have a lot of those when I was in Harding, but I do have a few. And Miss McPherson is also one of those people, but just like people that that look like you, that actually put, they are the examples as to why you want to go into that particular field. So I really, appreciate Ms. Dixon and your thoughts behind, doing the research and finding out, is this a cultural thing? Is it that a lot of Hispanic households are not pursuing the education track? If not, what track are they pursuing? And is there an opportunity to not really say like try to convince them to do otherwise, but expose them to the educational track? Because that also thinks about what our students are going to go into once they get to college. What are some careers that may interest them? And we hope education, fingers crossed, is one of those tracks for them. So that was one thing. The other thing, as I was listening, I've had quite a few individuals reach out to me concerning this. And one thing that they had asked, have we looked into the HBCUs? The East Coast is not really full of HBCUs. We're not the hub of them unless you're going all the way to DC or the DMV area. But I know a lot of students who are now going into education or may have gone into education. They should be out of school by now, but I'm not sure if they've decided to come back home and teach. I do have a couple friends that, and this is just my personal experience, I went back to the places where they graduated to teach because of pay. Because Connecticut or Bridgeport, in example, does not have the proper pay or high enough pay for teachers. But as we know, this is across the world. But just thinking, maybe I know that Housatonic and a few other places are adapting the HBCU model to really expose students that are either in the 2-year track or the 4-year track to potentially go into education. Quite a few different community leaders have asked me about that as well. And I saw you shake your head, so I'm assuming there is something either happening or on the rise. So that's good to know. But I'm really rooting for HBCUs and multicultural universities that will give, that have students of interest for this particular career. But like you said, when we were talking about this last year with Mr. Testani, is that, first of all, we don't have housing for those individuals that are looking to come back home. So once they get here and they realize the cost of living is more than the paycheck, now you have to juggle between what am I going to stay here, make less, or, stay here and not be able to have a home or build a family. So as we're thinking about those particular areas that brings that diverse community, these are the things that come to my mind. But that was just a whole spiel. But I do appreciate the research, and I do appreciate the efforts. And as I, continue to build, learning the different communities and the marketing aspect, I'll definitely bring you guys back ideas that we're currently doing now.
So if I could respond, we reached out to the HBCUs, and, I'm not opposed to traveling down south for a job fair. I would love to. But I think, when we think about the finance part of it, but the logistics in that a lot of the students may not want to come up to Connecticut. Interestingly, that you point out housing. So Michael Brosnan and I, there was an article, and I think it was in the Midwest somewhere, where they worked with the city and created affordable housing for teachers or city employees. And I remember jokingly speaking to Janine Hawkins about doing that. Wouldn't it be wonderful if the city and the Board of Ed can work together and create some type of affordable housing in a lot of these vacant warehouses or things that are slowly being redeveloped, and offer this subsidized housing for those who are employed by the city of Bridgeport and those who are employed by the Board of Ed to recruit and bring people in. I mean, it's expensive to live in this area, and let's not even talk about taxes. So it would be an amazing idea if we could work with the city to create some type of housing as an incentive to bring in, not just for the Board of Ed, but for the city of Bridgeport employees.
Absolutely. I have one more question, Mr. Sokolovic, if that's okay.
All right. Yes.
So on that point, you don't have to go far. Ms. Dixon, to really reach out to some of the HBCUs as well. There are a lot of fraternities and sororities that are very connected within the communities that have connections with HBCU's professors, and also students that are coming home into the different communities. And that's something that I can definitely link you up with some of the fraternities and sororities that their education is one of the main components that they really, really push. And they may know some individuals that are looking to work and serve in our community. So I'll be sure to connect you with that. But they also do job fairs. They also do career fairs as well. I currently work in New Haven. And there's always some type of career fair, especially with the chambers that are promoting education for those that are looking for employment. So I can definitely send you some information on that. And then that was just a comment. And then my other question would be, since the ESL students are increasing, are there going to be more staff support for those L students and ESL students?
So one of the programs that started last year was to focus on getting cross endorsements for ESL, the TESOL, bilingual staff. And that's something we're hoping to continue this year. I know Anna Sosa Martins, I don't know how she does it, but I think she's probably one of the most successful in filling her vacancies in her department. But we try where it seems that the bilingual and the TESOL, it's not a common area, and it's not that easy to get cross-endorsed and things like that. As far as additional support staff outside of teaching, that I am not sure about. I can follow up with Tim McNamara, who's the Assistant Director of HR, and he deals more with the non-certified staff.
There's no other questions for me. Sorry.
Ms. Castillo?
Seniors. Diploma seniors that are going to be graduating this year, please report to the cafeteria.
What is happening?
That is diploma.
Sorry, just a second. They're doing a little announcement. All right, good.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh,
Nothing. I just I want to add, I also agree. I think that the research that's been provided is very extensive and thorough, which is really great. I guess I just wanted to add two little points of nuance that I think are worth considering, because I think with Hispanic and Latinos, oftentimes we get kind of put into the same bucket. And one of the things to keep in mind is that, not all Hispanics identify as Latino, and not
Right.
all Latinos identify as Hispanic. So
Mhm.
that's one point. The other point is that, Hispanic and Latinos it's an ethnicity. It's not a culture. And within the bubble of being ethnically Hispanic or Latino, there's many different cultures. As a Puerto Rican woman, I can say that culturally, my experience is probably going to be very different than that of a Mexican person. So it's I think, the Spanish speaking common denominator seems to be like a good place to be able to recruit for teachers that um, are Hispanic or Latino. And I think I have seen that on some of the posts from the Bridgeport Board of Ed. You do occasionally have applicants that specialize in Spanish who are not Latino or Hispanic, right? So you have that catch-22. But I think for the most part, the majority of applicants that come through would likely be either Hispanic or Latino themselves. So, I think if we can keep kind of looking for creative ways to find Spanish speakers, that would be an effective way of recruiting Hispanic and Latino teachers, because culturally it's a very diverse situation, and ethnically not everybody identifies as one or the other. So that's all. Thank you.
That's true.
I don't know, man. Yeah, a couple of questions. As far as the interview process for a teacher, you mentioned a number 10%. I don't know if that was a hard number or just a reference point for, you said, let's say 10% apply and.
Oh, that was just
Okay.
a number.
Yeah, so I'm asking, basically, if somebody's interviewed and they don't get the job, are we tracking the race of the people who interview and are rejected? And are we tracking those parameters to stop for implicit biases among the hirings?
No. It's interesting. Well, actually, it's not interesting. It's a little sad. We don't have a proper HRIS system. We are now finally working on trying to get something in that's going to allow us to track a lot of this data. My office is still back in the 18th century with paper and things like that. So we're trying to streamline this where we have all that data on hand in the computer, and we could run all of these reports and come up with these hard figures. But we don't have the system in place to properly track it. Also, keep in mind when people fill out applications, they don't always answer the questions.
Right.
I know I'm guilty of that. Sometimes I may not feel like I want to answer what is my cultural or racial background.
Right.
But as far as the interview process and things like that, teachers are done mostly at the school level. But one of the things we were talking about doing is creating a interview and hiring committee of administrators, teachers, and all different levels, where we can come in and we could see all the applicants, streamline the questions and make sure the questions are uniform across the board and things like that. And then we create pools of candidates that have crossed our barrier first, where we'll go in. And this would be a very diverse committee of people, not only in their race and culture, but your job position, your job title. And then it will also help the administrators who, when you're in the thick of running your building and you need to fill your 3 vacancies, I'm sure it's a lot of work. So we're hoping to help streamline everything. And it also allows us then also more control over tracking and control over any type of unconscious bias or conscious bias that someone may exhibit or during the interview process.
Dr. McPherson, could you explain, as a principal, the process of hiring on the building level, finding teachers?
Sure. Obviously, once the position has been posted, go into ApplyTrack and literally go through the pool of candidates that are there and contact those candidates. Yeah, that's basically it. Depending on the time of year that you're doing it, obviously, like I have a vacancy now, let me say. I've been looking, but because we're kind of in almost the middle of the year, right? There's what's in there and who's in there. It's kind of who's been left behind type thing, right? Is that all right to say that?
I'll play the fifth on that one.
Or December graduates.
Yes.
Well, you're not. That's not necessary. And then obviously your position, your vacancy is going to be specific, yeah. So, but that's the process. Literally going in and obviously reaching out and making contact with HR for assistance as well.
But say you get 4 applicants for that one position. And you're blessed. And how would you select the candidate?
Oh, so I never interview by myself. All right. So I'll have a teacher there, not a teacher, a couple of teachers there, and whichever not auxiliary, but support staff that might be available. Because it's the school year, it will be easier to pull people together. Yet in the summer, I was able to pull people in through teams, right? So we create an interview committee. I have a standard set of questions that HR department had shared with us some years ago, use those, and we decide. So we're asking the same questions to each candidate. Do you know what I mean? To kind of eliminate any level of bias, so to speak.
We do that on a board level as well. And is the school governance councils involved in any way?
Yeah, we'll have the parent leaders involved if they're available. Yeah, absolutely.
So it says maybe that implicit bias training could maybe be expanded to anybody who conducts interviews, because you never know. You could see, like, in the sciences or the mathematics, if you get a bumper crop of people. And you got somebody, I'm just going to pick up some names, ethnically sounding names, Cruz, Blackwell, and Smith. And it's for a science position or a mathematics position. And one of those resumes got a misspelling or some verbiage issues because they're from another country. So the language isn't going to be all there. And that resume may be tossed to the side because of language, and verb transitions don't necessarily make a science teacher and a math teacher. And the place you would probably have those verb transition problems would be Native Hispanic. That's just some things.
Right. And I think, again, it's going to depend on the person reviewing this resume, these applications. Personally, I look for whether or not someone is certified. I look at their education level, like if they're bachelor's, master's, or 6-year doctorate. And then I look at their teaching experience or some type of education experience. I personally don't look at names right away. I look at other key points. But again, it's each person I think would have their own personal style in weeding out the candidates and deciding on who to offer an interview.
Joe. I just had a quick question.
Let me finish I'll recognize you in a moment. And as far as recruitment goes, ideas, I recently read in the paper one district, can't recall where, that was using a visa program from other countries.
So that was discussed. It's expensive. On average, a visa process can cost a school district approximately $10,000 per person. So recently I was involved in the visa for a teacher. And one of the things we did do, and I was speaking to the superintendent about, and with the Marlene Siegel, we talked about it. We had an MOU signed where the person agreed to remain teaching in the district for X amount of years. And each year, the amount of money paid by the district towards the visa is offset. If that teacher leaves the district prior to the end of the commitment period, then that teacher is responsible to reimburse us the remaining money. But it is an expensive undertaking.
Question, if you know off the top of your head, how much do we pay, say, Teach for America per applicant that they find as possible?
Their salary?
Not the bonus that goes to Teach for America for the recruitment efforts.
I don't know.
Okay, because say it's like, if it's like $2,000 a year, that's 5 years right there. That's the same cost of recruiting somebody from overseas.
I'm not aware of the Board of Ed paying any type of bonus to a TFA teacher.
Not to the teacher herself, but to the company.
I am not familiar with what, if anything, we pay. But I will have to double check and ask Marlene about that one.
Yeah, they recruited a few hard to recruit areas, I believe, in science and mathematics. And if they place somebody and they stay X number of years, they get a bonus. But if they leave, and if that's something that's comparable,
Right. Right. I know TFA, unfortunately, they're hoping to get a group of candidates for the 24-25 school year. Right. Yes, I think.
Okay. Ms. Kennedy, I recognize you.
In reference to recruiting, when you guys were talking about recruiting, I know that my sister she's a part of VIP. Well, she's a founder of VIP. Always going to HBCUs. So that's the connection. Bobby knows her. She was in VIP. So she's connected with them. They know her on a first name basis down there. So also going back in history a little bit, there's been times when people that I know that have never gotten an interview, and they could be Black, they could be Hispanic, never got an interview. That's a fact. I can give you names. So that's part of it. We were talking about implicit bias and stuff like that you guys were saying. So I would definitely say get in touch with Teresa Wilson in reference to how you can hook up with those HBCUs that she takes buses and buses for the last 30 years to children, with children on it, to the HBCUs and how to reel them back in. One other thing that you guys were asking about was, talking about was the salaries. I keep hearing that, and that's kind of bugging me. Teacher salaries. Why is the question that we cannot pay a competitive salary with the surrounding district? We're still all in Fairfield County. So I don't know what formula has to happen for us to become competitive, or our schools become so amazing that the teachers are knocking our doors down to come here. There has to be something, because I keep hearing that we can't pay enough. That, to me, that's an excuse. So how do we solve that problem? Not just the incentives with the apartments and so on and so forth. How can we get our teachers' salaries up? I don't know the formula.
I'll take it. Definitely funding. Thank you for that question. From
the city of Bridgeport?
From the city of Bridgeport.
From the state?
And the state as well. Because the city of Bridgeport does give the second, we actually improved to the second lowest per.
Oh, I can't hear you, Joe. I'm sorry.
We've improved to the second lowest per pupil expenditure in the city of Bridgeport. We were always last, but New Haven kind of surpassed us this year because they had a $2.5 million cut in the last budget cycle. And it goes hand in hand with the state as well. I mean, there's a new proposed bill out there that's going to give certain districts $27 million additional funding, and the city of Bridgeport $3 million. And
so
it's those kind of disparities.
The teachers don't. That affects the teacher's salary.
Absolutely. We've got how many teachers do we have?
1,500.
1,500. So you give 1,500 teachers $1,000 raise. That's $1.5 million. You get, that's right. Yes. You give them a $10,000 raise to compete with the suburbs. That's $15 million extra in our budget right there. And we've got $25 million ask for this year to just stay even where we are with our services. So it's important when we think about this, that we're competing for the same teachers. Every district wants to diversify. So some districts will reach out and offer a teacher color an additional step to attract those teachers and get a little more money.
Well, Bridgeport has to give.
Bridgeport definitely got to give money or create such a working environment to make it more pleasurable to stay. But we have,
Give them money.
yeah, we have a
The,
district that has many challenges.
right. The need for teachers has forced us to offer a higher starting salary than we have in the past. So we have increased our original incoming salaries for teachers.
That's good.
But we're also bound by the terms and conditions of the contract. That sets out their salary and their raises and when they can get step increases and everything. And that contract is under renegotiation, negotiations starting this summer, I believe. We'll start negotiating for the new contract for them.
Thank you.
It's tough. You're welcome. Ms. Castillo.
I mean, maybe this is more so something we can defer to, like our finance committee, but I always wonder if there's any way that we can move money around, you know, to free something up. Like, are we looking critically enough at our spending, and to be able to free up additional funds for this? Because I do think this is like important. This is probably among the top priorities in the district. Increasing salaries for teachers. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm just sharing that I think that I always wonder about that. It's like, are we spending well? Because this is a big issue. It's been a big issue for a long time, you know, and even though, you know, we have increased our salaries recently, our starting salaries, it's not enough. Not for college graduates that spend, you know, X amount of dollars on their education and, you know, have student loans to pay. It's not enough for the starting salaries in the city of Bridgeport.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Ms. Castillo, 100%. Teachers deserve more money. It's not a matter of willingness. It's a matter of ability. How are your algebra skills? I just want to make a metaphor. When you balance an algebra equation, if you put something on one side, you got to take it off the other side to balance it out. So if we let's do the $10,000, which is not really ridiculous to compare us to, say, Greenwich or Stanford salaries, and get that $15 million hit, that $15 million does in fact have to come from somewhere else. Where does it come from? Does it come from maximizing class sizes in all our schools and having the kids shoulder to shoulder? Does it come from our security personnel? Does it come from our school repair budgets? Or does it come from the bus stand? The kids got to walk 2 miles. So there's always going to be something that has to be cut when you add somewhere else. I mean, it's a zero-sum game. We have been suffering nickel and dimes for decades, or close to a century now.
And yet, as we speak about recruiting more diverse teachers, the challenge is, yes, there is the salary on one part, and I'd never negate that, but it's about finding the candidates.
Yes.
Right. So I think that is what the crux is. Do you know what I mean? So it's, where are they? How do we find them? We're not, you know,
Right.
We're not finding them. Or as you shared, there are those who are saying they're not being interviewed. So I think we can get diverted by the finance, but the raising the salary that's going to impact everyone. Yeah. But in terms of where are the candidates,
right,
locating those candidates that we're talking about, right, how do we raise that?
And again, to point out, I do want to do better than we did last year, but Bridgeport is doing far better than the rest of the states, and we're all competing for the same small pool. If we could create a situation where the whole pool expands, we could probably grab more of those things here. So I don't know what the answer is.
But I think
I'm gonna keep bringing this back.
But I
to
think some
committee
of-
at least once or twice a year until we resolve
the
it.
ideas that, not the ideas, the initiatives that the HR diversity committee is working on. Chairperson Bobby Brown mentioned sororities, be they deltas, AKA. There's other organizations, today's students, tomorrow's teachers, who had a presence in Bridgeport. Not quite sure where they are in the high schools, but it's about tapping, as that's already happening, right? Tapping into those agencies, because it's doable. I don't know about 5% or 10%, but it's doable.
Sorry, Ms. Castillo, is your hand still up, or you got another question?
Oh, no, it's not. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Casimir, anything else?
I just want to go over again, with all the ideas that you have for recruitment. Do you have enough resources, enough people helping you out with this stuff? Because I know that all these things take like small details and a lot of moving parts to some of this stuff. Do we have a marketing department that could help you out, or?
We do not have a marketing department.
And another thing, just before you keep going, a proper HRIS system. So does that mean that the system is outdated and it needs to be completely like?
Our system is, we run off of Munis, which is the city's payroll and their system. We are working with Frontline to create something more towards HR and where we can track our candidates, their certifications, and more of the data and information we need for HR.
Mm-hmm.
So we're underway with that. We did sign a contract with them, and we're going through the initial training and then creating the platform.
Oh, okay. So that's
underway, and we're hoping
Okay.
to have that up and running for this summer's peak hiring season.
And my last question is, what is the latest time that a applicant could have a job interview? Let's say if an applicant works all day long and they really want to work for the school system, what's the last interview time that you guys have? Is it 3, 4?
It depends on who's doing the interviews. We try to.
Right, because you do it as a group, right? Yeah.
Right. So if it's the school, I would have to defer to the school as to when they could do the interview. We try to be flexible, recognizing sometimes that people have emergencies. Though we prefer to do it in person, we might allow it to be over Teams.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a hard answer I could give it.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking on Thursdays, maybe for later interviews, or you just pick one day and say, let's interview until 7 for those people who work all day, at another job.
I think that's a great idea. And that's something that when I create an interview committee and team, that's something we can look into, is hosting later interviews one day a week or at least once a month or whatever. But I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, everybody. That was a great presentation. And Title IX presentation. Let's take
Getting rewarded.
Sure thing. Come on.
Okay, Title IX. So I did provide a copy of the handout or the training material that was provided by Bertram and Moses. We do at least once a year, there's mandatory training for Title IX officers. Every school has a Title IX officer, and then at least one. And then there's the district. At the district level, I am the Title IX coordinator for the district. Tim McNamara, my assistant director, is also a Title IX officer. So Title IX involves when there's discrimination or harassment based on sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. It does not apply to any other areas of protected status. And Title IX can apply to employees and students. So when we talk about sexual harassment, which is where Title IX kicks in, is that there's some type of sexual harassment. It could be between two colleagues, it could be between students, it could be a student and teacher, or teacher and student, or an administrator. So there are certain criterias or standards that have to be met for it to fall under Title IX. One is when an employee conditions an aid, a benefit, or service on participation in an unwelcome sexual conduct. That's called quid pro quo. Quid pro quo sexual harassment. It's a this for that. If you do this, I'll do that. Another example would be unwelcome sexual conduct that is so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to the district's education programs or activities. Now, it's not one or the other. It has to meet all three basic criteria: severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. So when this interrupts or interferes with, let's say, Susie is making unwanted gestures or comments to Lucy, to the point that Lucy doesn't want to go to band practice anymore, or Lucy starts cutting math to avoid Susie. That would fall under the interrupting or denying someone of an educational program. Sorry, I'm gonna take off my glasses. Now, educational programs or activities, it's the location, event, or circumstances over which the district exercised substantial control over the harasser and the context in which the harassment occurs. So these would be events or situations that occur in school, on the school bus, on a field trip, or during extracurricular activities. This does not, Title IX would not fall under students' personal or private social media accounts or things that occur outside of the school, unless there were additional actions or incidents that occurred inside the school. Then we also have situations such as actual sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, or stalking, which these are defined under criminal statutes. So the duties of the district when we learn of a Title IX, first and foremost, we decide whether or not this is an actual Title IX matter. The majority of incidents that are reported to me, I do also regularly review the situation with our legal department, and they don't rise to the level of Title IX sexual harassment. Again, a lot of it falls under that unwelcome sexual conduct that is so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. Again, it has to meet all three requirements. And a one-time incident may not satisfy all of those requirements. A pattern of behavior over time may meet all those three requirements. But first and foremost, we want to make sure that when we receive allegations or complaint of possible sexual harassment, we need to make sure that we ensure safety and also equality in how we address things. A lot of times we want to, if, for example, let's say it is something that does rise to the level of sexual harassment, we might have a knee-jerk reaction where we want to remove the alleged aggressor. We cannot so easily. There are certain things that we have to do before we can act or take any acts of what can be considered as discipline. So when they say our response to complaints must be equitable and prompt, we cannot delay addressing these things, and we have to be equitable. Equitable towards the aggressor as well as equitable towards the alleged victim. We have to be fair and not show any bias or conflict. So again, here we go again with unconscious bias or stereotyping. We have to be conscious of that. We have to, when a lot of times people, for example, when you think of domestic violence, a lot of people are quick to say, oh, a man cannot be a victim of domestic violence. That's not possible, because everyone thinks it's the woman who's usually the victim of domestic violence. That's an unconscious bias. That's not true. So we need to make sure that when we look at any allegations or concerns about sexual harassment, we're looking at it with open eyes and no preconceived notions, ideas, or stereotypes, because anyone can be a victim and anyone can be an aggressor. So again, I mentioned that in the packet, it labels our grievance procedures, all the things we have. On the HR website, you will see the Title IX link. And under there, the Title IX link, it includes the training material. It includes all the forms that we have to fill out or follow. It includes statutes under which Title IX and sexual harassment fall under. It includes the step-by-step grievance process when we address Title IX. There are formal complaints and informal complaints. An informal complaint is usually addressed at the school level. And this is where we put into place some type of counseling, or we adjust the schedule of the students where they don't have contact with one another. A formal complaint, any person has a victim has the right to seek a formal complaint. That's when my office would get more involved, and we would conduct a much more thorough investigation where formal forms and have to be filled out and signed, non-disclosure, confidentiality, and there's sharing of information where we present to the alleged aggressor the detailed account of what the alleged victim has claimed. So not only does the alleged victim have the right to file a formal complaint, but I, as the Title IX officer, has the right to file a formal complaint. So, for example, if this involved 2 employees and the alleged victim did not want to pursue it, but there is enough that we as a district cannot turn a blind eye, that it has to be addressed, then I had the right as a Title IX officer to file a formal complaint and conduct a thorough investigation. The thorough investigation can be conducted by me as the Title IX coordinator, or I work with the Title IX officers at each school a lot for them to conduct the investigation. They will do the interviews, they will prepare reports. When they prepare a report, then each party gets a copy of that report, and they have 10 days to review it and comment on it. When the reports and everything are completed, then it is presented to a decision maker. Now, that decision maker might be an administrator at the building, or I know in the past when I conducted an investigation, I used one of the executive directors as my decision maker. So there's steps along the way and multiple eyes looking at the formal complaint, the investigation, the reports, and the evidence presented. So it's a process that sometimes can take a little bit of time when we talk about trying to do interviews and follow up with interviews. Sometimes when it involves students with IEPs or 504s or things like that, we have to take that into account. And that's another layer that we look into before we make a decision on, is it a Title IX, actual Title IX matter. As I indicated, the majority of them do not rise to the formal level of a Title IX. A lot of the things we do then address it on the school level, counseling. We bring in the social worker, school guidance counselors, and things like that. In my tenure here, I think my office has conducted 2 or 3 formal full investigations regarding employees. And it comes in waves. I will, as to how many complaints or inquiries we receive. Last year, it could be because we were remote learning a couple of years before, but I think last year I probably received, I would say, around 15 inquiries of Title IX matters. Most of them do involve the students. A handful have involved employees.
Questions? Ms. Casimir?
Just one quick one. I guess it's more like it's a question. So you said that an accuser isn't removed right away. Like, I understand it has to be a due process, but I just want to give you a scenario. A female principal is accused of sexually harassing a male teacher, and that's on Monday. And then Tuesday comes, and there are, just give you a silly example, 2 more male teachers come and say, hey, this principal sexually harassed us too. Like, and then Wednesday, 3 more teachers. So I guess where I'm getting at is, like, where does it, in that particular scenario that I just gave you, where do you say, okay, well, we should at least take this principal off of, off duty or whatever until we keep investigating? I know that's a kind of silly example, but I really want to know.
I think it's different. It's different when we're talking about employees.
Mhm.
So employees, I have the ability with approval of the superintendent to place someone on paid administrative leave. Now, being placed on paid administrative leave, we're not depriving them of any type of due process or anything like that. We are not taking away their income. And this would allow us to separate them from the situation while we conduct an investigation. So there are certain situations where safety has to take priority over everything else, and we have to remove someone from the situation. If we can't ensure safety by separating them from students from their schedules or things like that, then yes, there are situations that might arise where we have to act before we complete a formal investigation.
Yeah.
Again, safety is always priority.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ms. Castillo?
Nothing, thank you.
Ms. Brown?
No questions.
Okay, I got a few. What would you say the most prevalent complaints you got out of those 15 were?
Say that again.
You said the 15 complaints over a certain time period. What was like the onus of the complaints?
Inappropriate comments, perhaps someone hovering over another person inappropriately, contact, whether it's intentional or accidentally, things like that.
Now I got a couple of scenarios. Because the whole reason I brought this up is because there seems some. We're talking about gender pronouns at the last one. I don't know if you were you on that call? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
And because well, anyway, it came to a shock. Some of the things in Title IX, for instance, restrooms. If if a student identifies as a female who is biologically male at birth, and that student goes into the female's bathroom, that's okay, right?
Yes.
And if a principal or somebody stops them and says you're not allowed to use that bathroom that goes with your gender identity, that is in fact a violation of Title IX?
No. It's not. It's not. Again, you have to meet those three criteria.
Okay, so one.
So it's a one time. It's not.
What about multiples? If the same principal forces that student through the entire
Over time,
say,
yeah.
ninth grade school year, and the student has complained and says, that's not what I'm comfortable in. I'm not just talking about a random child.
No.
Switching out, I'm talking like maybe a gender fluid student.
Right.
Or gender in transitioning.
Again, when we talk about Title IX, the three criteria has to be, and I lost it on my page.
Pervasive.
So severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that if it effectively denies a person equal access to the district's education programs or activities. Now, I will play devil's advocate. And I would say, well, by denying that person the right to use the women's bathroom, but they could still use the boys' bathroom, that I could argue that might not fall under denying access to the district's education program or activities.
Okay.
So
They have a choice.
if that was presented to me, as you said, I would probably say, no, that doesn't rise to Title IX, but we have a lot of other issues that we should be addressing with that administrator, and it should have been addressed a long time ago.
Yeah. So if it's repeated, I don't know, it seems like it's creating a hostile environment and putting that student in danger. Perhaps if the student has, boy, there's no good ways to say these things. If the student has, say, breasts
Mm-hmm.
and also male anatomy down below,
Okay.
for that student to have to go into the men's restroom might create such a hostile environment that students cannot avail themselves of the educational.
Again, you're operating on what ifs and speculation. Then now are you not exhibiting an unconscious bias that's saying that the boys in the boys' room, bathroom or locker room might be the ones to create an offensive or environment for the,
Possibly in my scenario building, you do have a point.
so. But it's not easy. It is, when you're dealing with something like that, I don't think there's any clear cut line. It falls under like what I might find offensive, you might not. And so it's an interesting thing, but when you look at what the requirements are, and when I look at it from my legal point of view, I will tell you that it would not rise to the legal standard of a Title IX.
Okay, so let's flip the switches. Let's get out of the bathroom and go on to the football field.
Okay.
Females or not transgender athletes playing for sports teams, because there's clear law on this, playing for sports teams other than their gender at birth.
There was a recent case about that. That you might have more of an argument, because by denying a person the right to play on that sports team is depriving that person of a school activity. So you're meeting that other
boys basketball team and a girls basketball team. They could still play for the girls basketball team if they're transitioning to male and vice versa.
True.
So And these are established cases.
Right. Yes, but I think when you're talking about something that would deprive someone of an actual activity or an event, going to prom or things like that, because they don't allow same gender couples to go to the prom or things like that. When your actions are preventing someone from fully engaging in school activities, or if we fall on, people want to say the stereotype that girls aren't good at science or things like that. Again, so when your actions are now treading into depriving someone of a right to an activity, to extracurricular activities or events, classes at school, then you, depending on the other elements or requirements, I think you're more likely to be able to argue or move towards Title IX.
Right. And how aware is staff, which I don't know if you know this, that people are allowed to use the proper the restroom that they identify with? Would you say that there would be a lot of confusion there, or maybe a need for more education, or?
Yes, I know this issue came up a year or two ago, and I don't know, Carmen, if you remember whether or not there were any policies or memorandums issued by the superintendent's office.
Right.
So yes, there's always room for further education and updating policies. So as this is a more and more common event or situation, people are identifying with certain genders or things like that, the incidents or the occurrences will be on the rise. And that is definitely something the district needs to make sure that all of our staff, our administrators are aware of, and even the students.
So it would probably fall under an additional Title IX training, or?
That wouldn't fall under Title IX training. This would fall under just, I think, general training. I don't think it would necessarily be under a Title IX training. I don't think, I mean, I don't want to say if something along the lines of a common sense training, but it's just cultural sensitivity and awareness training.
Okay.
Right, it's inclusion, right. Thank you.
Awesome. Now, Ms. Castillo, go ahead. I'll pick it back.
Thank you. I had a quick question. Do we have a process in place for students that do choose to use different pronouns? So, for example, if I was a student in the Bridgeport Public School District, me, Erica Castillo, and I decided to go by alternative pronouns, right? Or if I was in transition and wanted to go by different pronouns, what's the process for that? Is there like something, like how did the teachers become aware of that? What are the policies for how teachers should then refer to the student? That sort of thing.
Sorry, so Carmen and I were discussing this, and neither of us know if there's any set policy or procedure. But it was discussed during, I think, the administrators' orientation and welcome back training a couple of years ago that, again, if a student comes to you and informs you that I wish to be identified as A, B, C, and D, then that should be uploaded in Power School and everything like that, so I think the district makes every effort to address that and ensure that our database properly reflects what a student prefers to be identified as.
Okay, and so it's really just based on the student's personal identification. The parents, I assume, are not involved at all in that process or in how their child is being referred to at school?
I don't think we could give a clear answer on that. I don't want to say that parents don't get a say. So we'll have to look into that as to what role a parent would play, because I would also think it might then also depend on the student's age in that matter.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that there's some opportunity here to maybe implement something a little more structured so that the way forward is clear, so that if we do have the circumstance where a child comes forward and says, I'm experiencing this, I'm transitioning, I would like to be referred to as such, that there's a proper plan in place for how they can go about making that change without feeling that there's no way for them to, or deal with them having to be faced with, having unpleasant interactions in the school system because there's a lack of education around, how we deal with these things. And I do think that there has to be space for the parent voice and how the parent chooses to weigh in on the matter as well, because I think with most students in the school district, um, we are dealing with minors. And so I do think that there's still some um, thought that is happening realistically amongst our young people about some this it's a very explorative kind of chapter of life. So I don't want those students to feel that they can't outwardly express, or that they don't know how to, or they there's no implemented process for these things. So definitely something worth furthering the conversation on.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, and Ms. Castillo, thank you so much for that question. That was my next vein of questioning. I did in fact bring this up on the governance committee, and there's basically no policy in place. Say you're my teacher and I'm transitioning to female. I say, please call me Miss. You could actually right now in this point in time say, no, I will refer you to as Mr. Sokolovic because you have male anatomy. And there is absolutely nothing prohibiting that. And I had suggested on the governance committee that we create a training around this subject where teachers are obligated to call students by their preferred pronoun. And there was a little bit of a significant pushback and talk of indoctrinating our teachers and such like that. So it seems to be a very delicate subject. All right, but I don't know how you would indoctrinate a grown adult for respecting somebody's choice of pronoun. But it's definitely something that we need to look at. And as far as parental permissions, maybe for the young kids, I think there's some instances where students can come to school staff for certain things without parental permission, if I'm not mistaken. Like for instance, if they could go to the school nurse and ask for certain items, and they don't have to report to their parents, your child came and picked up a condom or something like that from school. Is that correct?
I don't know, only because since I deal with HR or staff, I'm not as familiar with the policies and all for the students, but I'm definitely going to follow up on at least the pronoun and the identity, how people choose to identify themselves, and ensuring that staff is respectful of how someone wishes to be addressed.
Awesome. Is this something we as a committee would like to explore further on expanding upon and going down the road? Because I think it'd be better to find an area where we could come together as three on some sort. Definitely going to have to be some sort of training. I don't know as far as changing policy would be sticking, but I think maybe some sort of training would be definitely beneficial to our staff and students.
Training, definitely.
And maybe even the board should sit in on some of these trainings, because it came out as an absolute shock that a student would be permitted to use a bathroom that's not assigned at birth, which has actually been quite a while in policy in the country. So, and if we as policymakers and decision makers are not aware of that, we definitely need to become aware of the things that we may be encountering. Okay. Does anybody have anything else on this subject?
Mm-mm.
No? I think that
No.
is it. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Yep, so moved. Or the second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one stayed. Motion carries. Please adjourn. Thank you, everybody. Great meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I would never know.
Family, you gonna say.